Batu, Barada, Nikto.
You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive.
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
What do you want to do? My God, it's full of stars.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and as always, I'm joined by Julian Darius. And Julian, I have one thing to say. I am your father.
Except you're clearly not, because everybody who knows that clearly doesn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a weird one.
We're going to get to that.
I have one thing to say, and that's get the fucking hyperdrive working. Oh my God. Change the movie.
Yeah. We're talking today about Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. Possibly one of the longest titles we've covered so far. Yes, we're going to continue our Star Wars. If you go back to, I believe, season 1, we covered New Hope, and now we're covering The Empire Strikes Back. So we are working our way through the new trilogy, and I'm pretty sure at this point we will have to go do a very specific about Return of the Jedi. But today we are talking about The Empire Strikes Back, often considered by many to be the superior film within the original trilogy, and in some people's cases they acknowledge it as the best Star Wars film of the entire saga. Let's see if we agree.
Well, I mean, to be fair, let's establish as a matter of objective fact that the pickings, they be slim. So, you know, like saying that like it's the best of, and look, I'm not knocking Star. I know everybody's going to be like, you're such an asshole, Joy. You know, like I'm not knocking Star Wars. I'm just saying, you know, like Star Wars is fun. I grew up. I have so much nostalgic feels watching this movie. But you know, like the pickings, like are these masterpieces of cinema? Yeah, no, they're masterpieces of music and design work. You know, we talked about. I mean, I'm still blown away by the music and the Macquarie design. But, you know, I mean, these are not exactly cinematic masterpieces. They're fun, but, you know.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about it. So, you know, plot summary, this obviously follows the events of Star Wars, and sort of sometime after, I think I sort of checked, it's indeterminate. I think some people say 6 months to a year, sort of following the events of.
I thought it was like 3.
Yeah, I think. Well, I might be wrong actually, but like this follows the events of Star Wars. So you know, Luke Skywalker is now an established member of the Resistance, and leads a squadron of fighter pilots, and they are sort of in hiding on the run from the Empire, on the ice planet of Hoth. When they are found on the ice planet of Hoth, they have to go on the run, and the Resistance goes on the run. While Luke goes off to sort of complete his training with the Jedi Master Yoda. Whilst doing that, he learns of a double cross that happens in Cloud City between when Darth Vader takes Han Solo and Leia and the rest captive, and so Luke goes to save them, and in doing so finds out that Darth Vader is his father. And it ends on a sort of a bleak note of the Resistance still sort of on the run, the Empire sort of chasing them, and Luke having been defeated really for the first time. And Han frozen in carbonite. This is the thing I will say about this film. Like you say, it's around 2 hours, just over 2 hours long. And this is having watched it, I wanted to watch it with more of a critical eye, like, you know. And I'm not coming in because the stuff I actually really like about this film, actually, it does not need to be 2 hours. I was really surprised that this film is that long. There are entire sections, like you say, with there's repeat story beats just again and again, where I'm just like, okay, like, you know, doesn't need to be this long. This just feels like padding. Yet, on the flip side, people seem to, we've said this about the first Star Wars, people travel great distances and don't seem to communicate to each other at all, and go off and just do random stuff. So
Yeah, it's a very strange. I mean, first of all, the Star Wars universe is very strange with regards to distance. Nobody seems to know where they are or how far it is, and a parsec is a measure of time. As a measure of time, I mean, you know, it's a very strange universe, and characters just seem to be at other places very fast, and yet also they sense a death light years away instantly with the Force. I mean, it's all very, very strange, and that continues here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the big one for me is when they leave Hoth. Han and Leia go off in the Millennium Falcon, and Luke goes off in his X-wing, but doesn't communicate to anyone he's going to Dagobah. He just sort of goes. Even like R2's surprise is his sort of mech droid. He's like, "No, we're going off to Dagobah now," and they just go. And at no point do you think I should really let everyone know I'm all right. And
Rule number one of spelunking. Okay.
yeah, exactly. Like we are being chased by the Empire, yet I'm going to go off on my own and not tell anyone. It seems really selfish, but I know that's a Luke sort of trait, but
yeah, I guess. I mean, it's a very strange structure, and I do like this movie to a degree. I mean, there are things that I admire about this film. It's a very strange structure. Its first act is entirely on Hoth and divided between sort of like two movie serials, and obviously Star Wars is very influenced by movie serials.
Oh, yeah.
And the first is just kind of this weird, dumb adventure on Hoth, where Luke's out in the cold. I'm going to go get it.
You know why that happened, don't you? Just as a sort of a side note, you know why that first bit happened. So the whole thing with I think it's the whole thing, but it changed. So you will note that the when he is returned after being saved by the snow beast or whatever it is, the scarring on his face looks very realistic. He looks very sort of it's because it is real. He'd been in a motorbike crash, and they had to come up with a reason as to why he was so bashed up for parts of filming, and so they were like, okay, we'll have this story now. You're right. However, what I would say is this is where I think there's a success to this film. The first 40 minutes for me all works. It feels like Star Wars.
Yeah.
And I
strongest stuff.
Yeah, and the whole everything on Hoth I really like. I think it reestablishes characters and relationships. It gives you a sense of stakes, with Hoth being attacked and what the Resistance is trying to do, and it's all really good stuff. I mean, I really like everything on that beginning, like Luke when he gets attacked by the snow beast, and Han going out to save him, and all that kind of stuff. It's sort of, and then Han and Leia arguing about it. Like it builds up this sort of like relationships and some of that. And so I like all that good stuff. This is utilized well. Apart from
the second half of the Hoth stuff is the Empire attacks. Which
exactly, yeah, like
half.
Yeah, but again, I love all that. Like they're trying to escape. It feels like it's at stakes. Like if this is one of the things where the Empire doesn't feel foolish. Like it doesn't feel like incompetent. Like they feel like an efficient force. Like they are attacking the Resistance and they are doing damage.
Yeah, I think that the best part of that for me, I mean, like, yeah, the AT-ATs are kind of like not the most efficient design,
but they are cool. I don't care what anyone says; they are still one of the coolest things.
Hey, I agree with that. And look, I'm not knocking it. There's a lot in this first 30 minutes or so on Hoth that I think, that's kind of embarrassing, but it's embarrassing in a charming way. Like it's embarrassing in like, oh, okay, Luke is going to get into the underside of one of the AT-ATs and throw a grenade, and you're gonna just see, which is like so Flash Gordon, right? Like,
yeah.
And and then he's going to run away, and you're like, oh, that doesn't look great. Like, do we need to see this? But then you think, yeah, I would totally buy this as just homage to the movie serials, and it's kind of charming in its primitivism, and it's like, oh, here's another way you can destroy an AT-AT. Let's just show it. And so sort of like everything in that first 30 minutes that seems a little off to me or a little silly, I kind of can forgive.
Yes, I agree with that. No, I agree. Scott. I completely agree. I mean, there are things that make me chuckle, like you say, the throwing the grenade inside at some random port. It's like everything has this sort of the exhaust port of the Death Star, and that's got a hole you throw things into,
It's like
and
the Art Deco trim of the Empire is the exhaust
Yeah.
port. It's part of their, aesthetic.
Exactly. I mean, I love the fact that by throwing that in, it blows up the head. That's the bit that I love. Like, it throws in a grenade and then the head explodes of the atom.
The head doesn't explode. The head, what I thought is so it falls down and it's like, oh, it's disabled. Clearly, the stormtroopers inside are going to starve, are going to die in the cold. Except then a ship comes along and blasts it in the neck and it explodes. And I'm like, wait a minute. If you just had to blast it from
could you not have done that before?
Why haven't you been firing at the neck?
Yeah.
What? Surely it falling over doesn't make the neck more vulnerable. But it's one of these it's a very Lucas thing. It's already defeated. Logically, this is the end. But we need to give that visual show that it's defeated. So let's just have something come along and blast it.
Yeah, and I'm quite comfortable. Like you say, it's a little silly, but I agree. It's where you can forgive it. I mean, the whole thing of wrapping a cord around the legs of an AT-AT. The first time that happens, the Empire should be like, yeah, that's not good.
Design flaw.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The first moment they're like, we can be defeated by a skipping rope. All right, that's not good.
Instantly, Darth Vader's like, bring me the man who designed the AT-AT. Just jokes him to death.
Yeah.
The number of that's why the AT-AT was designed. It's because he's murdered all the good engineers. His management style leaves a lot to be desired.
Yeah, the people that are left were just sort of weren't engineers at all. There was just sort of some ensign that was just I don't know, it walks. All right, build that.
That's the true story behind the exhaust ports.
Yeah.
Forget Rogue One. It's like all the good engineers are dead.
No one wanted to take responsibility for it, so they all gave it to the poor person that was on a sort of apprenticeship. Give it to the apprentice.
Yeah, the Empire's just answering the galactic Craigslist ads, going engineer wanted for design work for next movie's toys. Odds of survival 20%.
Yeah. But it's one of those weird things, like you say. It's clear that these were designed because the AT-AT is an all-terrain vehicle. That's the point of it. Mm-hmm. It's clearly not very all-terrain. I mean, it looks good. I do love the design. I do love the walkingness of it, and I love the way they've. Even what I would say is because it's obviously done with stop motion. It's obviously this is pre-CGI, so it looks, as you said, there are still things that haven't aged great, but I still love all those kinds of special effects. And it's when you sort of look at sort of the way that they've considered the way that almost at the hips of the machine, the way the AT-ATs move and stuff is really well thought out. And I love just watching them. I'm like, this looks really cool. When you see them coming across the snowfield, I'm just like, yeah, this looks cool. Because the one thing I would say is what I like about this is, again, Star Wars. I love the Resistance are all in trenches. There's very much they sort of got that sort of First World War. They're all stuck in trenches, firing out of those sort of things. They're embedded in to the land, trying to defend that the power converter or the energy thing, sort of. And then you have this much greater force, literally just stomping its way towards them. It's a really cool visual, and it sort of works for me. It's like, oh Christ, these are the stakes. These little people, this small resistance force against this massive might of this mechanical empire. Really looks kind of cool, and so it does make me think of it that way.
That's a very good point, and I think that the thing that most of all I fault Star Wars for, and there's a lot that I criticize Star Wars for, but the thing that I think it most fails at is its number one fundamental job, which is to portray the Resistance as the underdogs.
Yeah.
And it fails on every level to do that, right? I mean, our guys are main characters are just untouchable. They can, wander wherever they want, take down anyone they want, get away scot-free. The stormtroopers are terrible shots to such a degree. It's,
a comedy meme. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's a meme. And so, to me, that Haas sequence, you're right. It depicts the Resistance as the underdogs. And I think one of the things that, they're hiding, that's key, first of all. And then secondly, that the second this cool design little droid, is found, it's like, oh yeah, it's found us. Time to evacuate. there's no discussion of like, oh yeah, we're gonna fight them. It's just like, no, we are an inferior force hiding in the ice.
Yes.
Instantly, the call is evacuate, and that really gets across. And the goal is like, let's get a couple ships carrying people out, and that becomes the issue. The issue isn't resistance, even. It's just save as many lives as we can. And that really makes you feel like, yeah, they're the underdogs. And I get the central dynamic of the story, without which the story doesn't work. And yet, Star Wars is really terrible generally at depicting that. But the hot stuff does that great.
It does. That's why I like it so much. Because the thing is, it does it. It sort of falls off a cliff a little bit with the escape, because the fighting's been amazing. I'm liking sort of like you see that there is consequences, like people die. Luke loses his co-pilot. Like they're,
Yeah, that's
like,
awesome. He tries to free him, and he gets stomped on, and it's not graphic, but it's like, oh,
yeah. I mean, I know, like there are kind of like people are going to die, like you say, they are an inferior force, and so that whole sort of first 40 minutes, like I really feel that. The moment I go, oh, a little bit, is they have, I don't know what they call it, like there's a gun, there's a weapon that they have that they fire at one of the Star Cruisers or Star Destroyers, and all of a sudden that Star Destroyer is like, and sort of floats out the way, and one of their sort of escape ships is able just to sort of glide past, and they're like, they've got away, yay! And I'm like, wait a minute, there was like 5 of those before, like where's everybody else, what's going on? And again, all of a sudden it's like, to move the plot forward, the escape is now going to be incredibly easy, and everyone else gets away.
but that's Star Wars staple, right?
Yeah, I know, but
yeah,
it's such, it
right,
almost feels,
it is ridiculous, and
it feels unsatisfying. Yeah.
Why didn't you fire that sooner? Why didn't, I mean, you got this cool gun. Why not just fire that at the Star Destroyers?
Yeah. I mean, what I one of the things that I thought watching this actually, which was, and I've got to go back and watch it now, is watching The Last Jedi. The what's his face that did that one? It was clearly like aping this, like this whole thing about the resistance being on the run and all this other stuff. I was like, oh, that is Empire Strike Back. And I've never really thought of, like, I know people sort of said it, but I hadn't really made the full connection. But now for the first time, I'm like, oh yeah, no, this is definitely what they were going for. And so yeah, I don't know, it just feels a bit like everything that it begins with sort of starts to tail off into the sort of, like you said.
You're right, but let's talk about a couple more things that are really good about the Haas stuff, and that the movie is doing right. I mean, and let's be clear, like the Haas stuff is not smart. It is not amazing cinema, but it is like, I wouldn't say campy. It's not really campy, but it's like updated movie serial done right. It's
Definitely
smart. It's just like good visual fun. It's a fun story.
It's a good adventure. It's a really well done adventure. Like I'm enjoying it.
Little, sci-fi adventure serial. I'm on board. Looks great. Great design work. I have so much like toy nostalgia from this movie.
Yeah.
So when they're like, release the tow cable. Yeah, I had that, man. And tow cable, man. And it's stupid, but I never had the at to like tie around, and it wasn't really long enough. But the fact that they built that and came with a tow cable. There was the Tauntaun. There was the Tauntaun toy that had the like soft plastic stomach that you could split a guy up inside. Like, that's so gruesome. They would never make that today. But like,
bless the 80s. Bless the 80s for the things they did.
It's like a step away from having, the Sunday morning cartoons of the adventures of slit open Tauntaun. The 1980s were weird in a wonderful way. And even like that little stupid like gun emplacement on Hoth, just like, a little stand with a fixed gun on top. But, there was a toy for that. I had that toy. What? How did you play with that toy? We did. Like, you just position it and it stays still and fires straight ahead. Yeah. How did you play with that? We didn't. We had no practical function, but it looks cool, and we needed that toy.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's there is that, because I never really had the Star Wars toys. I was never that sort of. I know people who did, But yeah, there is so much in this. Like I say, the design element of this is interesting in the sense of, I know that like Lucas took toy rights and merchandising rights in sort of lieu of payment for the whole sort of franchise sort of thing, and it's quite clear that he's obviously he's not stupid. He's very bright, very clearly sort of. Him and Macquarie sort of came up with these things. I'm like, that's cool and can be made into a toy. That one maybe not so much. Right, leave that one. Do this. Like they figured that out as to what could be the toys. I mean, the figures are obviously sort of like notorious for not just having your sort of your main characters, but like fifth Gungan from the left sort of kind of thing, where it's sort of like they've given a whole backstory. But this does have some really good design elements where you would go. Like, I remember seeing the AT-AT toy and being like, that's something I want. Like that AT-AT was amazing. I
had a therapist's office that I went to as a kid, and I don't even remember why. Like my family was in therapy. I don't know. It was in California. It was in Pasadena. Why were we in therapy? I don't know. But all I know is that therapist's office had an AT-AT toy in the waiting room. And my brother and I played the hell out of that AT-AT toy. And I have no idea what we talked about. Like, we probably went in there and they're like, are you being hit, kids? And we're like, I don't know. We'll have to find hitting. I don't remember that shit. That didn't matter. What mattered is I had that AT-AT for like 20 minutes.
Yeah, you're like,
I want to go into the therapy appointment.
Show me on the doll what happened. You're like, can I do it on the AT-AT? Can I bring the AT-AT?
Yeah, no. Gonna turn. I will tell you, but only on the AT-AT. And can I take it home?
Yeah. No, it is, and this whole sort of section, like I say, is such a and also put it on a snow planet and everything else. Like,
yeah,
I do like the idea that this is a sci-fi trope that sort of plagues not just Star Wars, but many. Like Star Trek has done it for decades as well. This thing where they land on a planet and like this 4 mile square place that they're going to visit is how the entire planet is. So we're going to refer to this as the desert planet, the ice planet, whatever. And you're like, no, like you look out your window, like
planets. Yeah, I mean, granted, in the solar system, we can say like, oh, okay, like Venus is cloudy and incredibly hot, right? But I mean, yeah, there is. What's worse is like, oh, this is the prison planet. This is like
Genosha. That's the clone planet. And you're just like, look, the entire planet. Fair enough.
Right. It's like when you want a car, you buy it from the car planet, and when you have trash, you send it to the trash planet. And if you want furniture, you buy that from IKEA planet.
Yeah,
it's a little silly.
Yeah, but like and I like the way they try and sort of they make them smaller. So in Return of the Jedi, it's a forest moon, and you're still going like, all right, like I'm still not buying that, but fair enough. But it looks
cool.
It looks cool, and I'm quite happy to accept that.
And also, I think the characters are clicking much more than in the original.
Yes, definitely.
I think the characters work, especially in the first 30 minutes. We're still at. But I mean, first of all, Han is amazing. Like Harrison Ford, like is just a guy. He sleepwalks through that first one. He is suddenly just like a macho adventurer. He's the best Flash Gordon we've ever had. I mean, he's got that swagger. He just belts out like, they're like, oh, it's dangerous out there. And he's like, that's right. And my friend's out in it. It's like, then I'll see you in hell. He's just oh my God, he's such a 50s adventurer sci-fi character, and he pulls it off.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. This is the Han that I think people remember. Like everyone talks about New Hope, but this is the Han that people go, oh, this is the Han Solo that we remember. This is the one that does all this stuff. He's a lot more interesting in this film than throughout the film. Like Harrison Ford sort of gets it. I mean, what's interesting is this is 1980, and obviously sort of the following year he would be Indiana Jones, and this version of Han Solo is much closer to the character who would play, the gruff, especially of the Raiders of the Lost Ark. This is closer to that Raiders of the Lost Ark Han Solo, Indiana Jones, and so I like that he's obviously gone. This is the character that I can play, and do well. That gruff, and he's accepting his gruffness a little bit, which I think really endears me to the character a bit more. However,
Yeah.
he is, although he's better, and I really enjoy him in a lot of this film, there are parts where I'm a bit like, okay, it's becoming a little one note.
Yes. Oh, of course, absolutely. But I mean, let's be clear. Indiana Jones is like that too. I mean,
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, I'd accept that to an extent. Maybe one day we'll come.
No, I mean, I know what you're saying, but the thing is, like, he's part of an ensemble cast, and
Yes.
his job is to be the like lovable rogue who, I mean, it is funny how quickly he turns from "I'm getting out of here, princess" to "My friends are in trouble, I'm staying."
Mm-hmm.
And I think for the most part that works.
Mm-hmm.
There's kind of like a heart of gold inside there, but it's wide. It's never really, stated. I mean, you're right. It's one note, and especially, but he's in an ensemble cast. He doesn't have as much time. Where I think it feels more one note is where everything is a joke about Princess Leia, and everything is just like he's
That's sort of
from the rogue character to the like, come on, girl, you want it, where it's like, oh, a little too gruff, maybe.
Yeah. Oh, you've escalated to sex pest. Okay, that's.
Yeah,
we need to talk about that. Yeah.
Hey, princess, you got a problem with my hands on you? I mean, he never quite says that stuff, but it's always like kind of up to the line.
Yeah, and it has that, and this is where you go back to that idea of it being, like you say, the 50s serial and those sort of things. Like there's a scene, the two scenes that sort of strike me is that one you mentioned before when he goes out to save Luke, and I do love it. Like he jumps on the tauntaun and he's like, "I'll see you in hell," and he sort of rides out. Sort of, like you are like that, yeah. That's sort of like very I can imagine that in sort of like those serials of sort of Flash Gordon or Buck Rogers, and it's very much that space adventure.
Even just as a quick note, want to say that he pulls it off, and that's not the same Han from the last movie.
No, he's very different, and like I say, much even the cutting open of like the tauntaun and to put Luke in there and stuff like he's what's what I'm looking for, sort of resilient, and he sort of knows what he's doing. He's not just a rogue. Yeah, but he's not just a rogue pilot. Like he knows stuff. Like you get the fact he's a survivor. Like he knows how to do stuff. Like you more so than in the first film. Like it feels like he's you feel like there's a history there. Like even between him and like him and Chewbacca in the first film are sort of like they're good, but this one is where it feels like there's a real sort of history and relationship between them. The way they sort of talk to each other and stuff about the Falcon really works. And so, but there's also like he has an element of humor to him that I think is works as well. Like there's a moment when they're obviously arguing about the Falcon, and C-3PO says about something needs fixing, and he's like, oh, whatever, you tin moron. And then sort of next bit he sort of says to Chewie, he's like, yeah, we should probably change this, sort of do them as well. And C-3PO sort of looks over his shoulder like, hang on. There's little moments like that where I'm like, okay, he is that guy. Like I get who he is. Like he's like, so his machoism is who he is. Like that's how he sort of he sees it himself in that way.
Unlike the present day macho and kind of like get your politics out of my Star Wars kind of, versions of macho characters. Like you're saying, the movie takes the piss out of him, and has him shows he's kind of ridiculous, that underneath that macho is like,
it comes through, and that's what I mean. Like it comes up again and again. Like you say, the film sort of, and the others sort of, even like the fact that Leia is able to see him for what he is nice. I think that's why I like their relationship a little bit. Like you say, it goes to the line, and the bit where he actually kisses her is a little bit rapey. But I'm like, but I'm still like, I get why.
First time when he's on the Falcon,
yeah, and I'm a bit like, okay, but I get why there's an attraction there. Like it's clear why she is frustrated, because she obviously has a mission, she has a goal in life, and she's dedicated herself to the Resistance, and he's almost like a distraction. And I honestly feel, and this could be just headcanon the way I'm reading it, like part of her frustration with him is a frustration with herself, that she's like, I can't be attracted to this guy. Like he's an idiot and he's a distraction, and I've got to I'm committing myself to this other thing.
Well, she even says, I like nice guys, Yeah. She wants it to be true. It's obviously not true, right?
No, exactly. Like she's trying to convince herself just as much as everybody else. And
she's a princess, right? She
exactly.
Like nice guys.
Yeah, and so I like that like she's the same. Like Leia in this is much more. one of the things I find in this is that like the characters overall are much less whiny
Good point.
than they are, or sort of like screech. You know, there was a little bit of like whininess to them in New Hope. If I'm personally honest, all of them. That's all pretty much gone, and they
It's like woe is me-ism, in the first.
exactly like because Leia feels much more like she's in command. Like she feels like she's got the weight of the world on her shoulders, and she's sort of like there's a frustration about all of it. So I get it, and I think Carrie Fisher is actually very good at sort of portraying that at times.
Let's come back to that for a second. What was the second Han scene that you said you think of all this time? The first being "I'll see you in hell" going out.
Oh, the second one is that thing that sort of feels much more like Han. Is that thing when, like, say, they're on the Falcon and C-3PO points out that something has to be done to fulfill things, and he says he's mean to C-3PO, but then sort of like says to Chewbacca, he's like, "Oh, whilst you're up there, we need to change the whatever converters." And again, I like the fact that
you were going to say the second scene would be right as he's frozen, which is one of the real highlights of the last hour and a half. That stuff works really well for me. But Princess Leia, and I was watching with a friend of mine, and Princess Leia says, "I love you," and it's this desperate, like, you may be about to die. I don't know how, but it works. And he says, "I know." And my friend, who was a woman, laughed and said, "What? He's such a dick. You're about to die, and you use that as an opportunity to be like, I know I'm that guy."
It's one step away from "I told you so."
Yeah. No.
I love you. I know you do. I told you so.
Yeah. I've been trying to get that admission out of you for like 2 years.
It's a weird, because some people hold it up as like a really romantic moment, but I'll be honest with you, it's never worked for me. It's always been a bit like, oh, that's a real dick moment, to be perfectly honest.
Well, see, I had a conversation with my friend exactly about that, and I was like, well, isn't this is like the romantic thing of like the bad boy, right?
Yeah.
And, he doesn't always give that emotional satisfaction. He withholds it, but then he gives it a little bit later and doles it out here and there. And obviously that can be seen as abusive and terrible, but that can also be seen as like, well, no, that's James Dean, or that's, sort of attractive.
That's what they're going for. Oh, no, without that. And I think this has to be taken in the context of the time. Like, I guess it's 1980, but this is clearly referencing that sort of like rebel without a cause kind of character. Like, so I understand that, like the Marlon Brando of the 50s and stuff, like,
the Parsec
like,
run.
Yeah, like Streetcar Named Desire is, I can imagine, well, think of like, the other films he made, like, think of what's the 50s film he made with Ron Howard in, George Lucas made. God damn it.
Who's he now? Dean?
No, George Lucas made that film that's sort of like based in sort of the 50s and stuff. And
American Graffiti.
American Graffiti, like, you can see that's clearly on his mind, like those sorts of characters. And so like those characters, that Marlon Brando, James Dean sort of like, is clearly a
outsider.
Yeah, exactly. Like that rebel sort of is clearly there. And so it's all part and parcel of it. So I accept that's what it's there for, but it's whether sort of like you still think like, yeah, all right, I like you because you're cool, rebel, and you go, fair enough. But there are other scenes actually that I think that that I find Han Solo more appealing in, and it is those moments where you do sort of like, they do reveal his, not so much his idiocy, but they poke fun at him, or there's a vulnerability there. The fact he's the one that gets tortured, and stuff, and you see him sort of like, you hear him screaming, like it's not like a sort of like, it could have gone the other way where it's sort of like, you will never get anything out of me kind of gruffness. But no, he is tortured, and you hear him sort of screaming, like they break to an extent, like they harm Han Solo, like, and when he's returned, like he's battered and stuff. So I like that again, like he's not invincible. He's, like you said, like, they do the things they need to do, and sometimes it's easier than it should be. But I like the fact in this film that they give him a right kick in. Like the characters get a bit of a beating, and it makes them much more endearing.
Well, let's be clear. To be a true Star Wars movie, you have to have a torture. It was Leia in the first one, and it's
Mm-hmm.
this, and that's just a trope, and it's just sad that that's died. Well, the thing that struck me is Han. Like, I don't know, that it did. What didn't work for me is Han just goes back to his cell. You're right. He's clearly.
Oh, he recovers very quickly. Yeah, he recovers very quickly.
That's true of Leia in the first one, and it's
Yeah.
why do either of these scenes exist? They don't advance the plot at all. It's clearly like the Empire's bad, and they like torture, And I wonder, I mean, I would say, like, I wonder if anyone saw this in the Bush administration, but then you had, Cheney saying we got to go to the dark side and beat Darth Vader. So they clearly had and thought this was a good idea. But what struck me is like Han saying, they never even asked me anything.
Yeah.
Which sounds like such a great kind of like badass, line. Badass not about him, but about like the Empire is just like, oh, they're bad. They're torturing for the sake of torture. But then you think, why wouldn't you ask anything? You're searching for Luke. Like, what is going on at this point in the movie?
I think this is.
I'm so.
I've taken that as a bit of a thing. So in my head, he knows. It's a bit like, to me, he's looking at the other characters, and obviously, like, let's say who's got. He knows he's got Leia. Like Darth Vader knows he's got Leia. He's already had run-ins with her, and so he's like, okay, well, I don't know what this person knows, but. There's no point, maybe like maybe it is that gruff thing of acknowledging of sort of like, well, I can't torture information out of him, but if I torture him, it might break the others. Sort of like it's that fear factor, that sort of like that sort of trying to sort of induce.
Maybe,
but that's not explained. Stuff, right? Oh yeah, that's me putting it in there. Yeah, that's not in the film.
Yeah, I mean that is a possible explanation, and it makes sense. I mean, of course, if you're going to do that, you probably torture Leia, to make Han.
But he's already done that one in the previous film. They can't keep doing that in every film.
They can't keep torturing Leia. Can you imagine what people would say? Like, if they torture Leia in every movie.
Yeah. So he gets tortured in the first two films, and then in the third one, she's forced into a bikini. Like, it probably wouldn't stand up in any way. Yeah. One of the things, let's talk about sort of that, though, because there's another character that sort of becomes important at this point, and obviously, because they are caught on, is it Vespin, the Cloud City?
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, that's where they are captured, and that's where like Han is tortured and that sort of thing. So we meet Lando Calrissian. As the joke being originally like the only black guy in the Star Wars universe at one point.
There's one black guy and one woman.
Yeah, that was it. Until well, you got Mon Mothma, so they got others. There's other people, but like very rare. But Lando is an interesting character, and again, watching it this time, I was sort of like umming and ahhing. So they talk, and this is where I think there's another thing than this. These obviously we're watching the special editions. These are the upgraded versions. So when you look out the window, like Cloud City is much larger than it was in the originals. Mm-hmm. But there's a moment when he talks about how we're only a small mining operation, and I'm looking out the window going like, no, you're a vast city. You're huge. Like, this is ridiculous. But
you were a small mining operation in 1980. You've clearly grown since then.
Yeah. And I'm going like, I'm thinking in 2022, like a small mining operation is probably 3 guys. Like, nowadays, like there's no mining going on. But one of the things I note is he's obviously, they know him as a scoundrel, and he was a con artist. He was original owner of the Falcon. And through prequels, we've now got all that information, and I don't give a shit about it. But he's obviously escalated to this point of being the responsible party of this mining colony. Like, these people, he is responsible for them. Mm-hmm. And so there's this thing where they keep talking about him being a traitor. So he has this, he makes an agreement with the Empire. They turn up on force. Like, Darth Vader turns up with stormtroopers in this colony, and he is given a choice where they're basically saying, like, look, you either give us what we want, or we are going to become very heavily involved in the running of your people's lives. But Leia was like, "You're a traitor. You betrayed us." But watching this is the first time I've watched it and gone, "Yeah, but he sacrificed you, but to save an entire population." Yeah. He made the right choice. I'm sorry, but
Well, but again, it's like the trick of you don't see the stormtroopers' faces, right? So
Mhm.
they're non-entities. It's okay to kill. In the same way, you don't see the population of Cloud.
Well, you
Almost
do,
all.
but like you see people, but you don't get to know anyone. I know you're not given
Yeah.
sort of like they're not given a
Background,
name.
right?
Yeah,
I mean,
but still.
our guys are our guys, and he's a traitor to our guys, right? And this is the problem of narrative of having protagonists.
Mm-hmm.
They just inherently are feel
Right.
correct.
Yeah.
But
no, that,
yeah,
but
I mean,
this
I
time
like,
it bothered me. Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I like Lando. I mean, you're right about that, though. I mean, the whole Lando Han thing, I think, works pretty well.
Mm.
One thing that doesn't work well for me is, I mean, at this point, the plot is so much more convoluted than the actual story, right? Like,
Yes.
the actual story is they leave Hoth. Luke goes one place, the other guys run away for a long time and get caught. They have a couple different settings, but they just run away and get caught, right?
Yeah.
And then Luke shows up and kind of saves them and gets, his hand chopped off. That's the whole story. I mean, not a lot there, but like, okay, so the Empire found them because Boba Fett, who had a toy come out 2 years previously, so they had to do something with him, follows him in Slave One, no longer Slave One, and apparently Darth Vader sending guys into this stupid, how much I hate the asteroid belt that's like, there's no chance of getting through here. Yeah, I mean, the asteroids, how have these not disintegrated by now? It's so stupid, mind-bogglingly dumb. And then the space worm that, how much I hate.
That bothers me. Yeah.
Everything dumb in Star Wars. And then, hiding on the ship, I mean, it's so stupid.
That thing of being attacked, like they don't have sensors on board the ship that detects something's attached to it, and then they just like detach and become part of the trash. And I was just like, oh, that's not good.
There's that. I always think of MacGruber. There's MacGruber where he sends the woman in disguise into the warehouse, and instantly they say, "Hold on a minute, that's not Bob." It's shooting instantly. Like, oh, I just wanted somebody to yell, "Hold on a minute, that's a Millennium Falcon behind us." Like, how do you not have sensors? Oh, that giant piece of trash was the ship. How did they not look outside the ship? How do you not have cameras outside the ship? I mean, and and I know what they've done. It's crystal clear. I don't know. I mean, it's too stupid.
Yeah, that whole section, the running section from the side story is not good. It feels, like you say, serial silly. Like that's where it's sort of like, oh, okay, that's what's happening here. And that's where I sort of feel it drops off. Like I lose interest at that point, to be honest. It's not good.
Yeah, and then we see you're right, and then we see the Vader's brought in the bounty hunters, and like you have multiple Star Destroyers. What are these bounty hunters? Why are you paying like a team of like 3-4 people? Like, I'm a reptilian. I'll do what your Star Destroyers have it. Like, what was the point of this? Oh, right, to sell a Boba Fett figure.
Yeah.
And then he's like, oh, I noticed, I look at trash. My special skill is to look at trash. Print that on my file card.
Yeah, it's weird. Again, this is the first time, as I say, watching it with this sort of with a certain thoughts and process. I was like, I thought the same. I was like, why have you brought in bounty hunters? Like, there's no sort of like, because in some, whenever you see this in modern films, they do an action film and they'll have like, like a black ops team or, like a contractor. So they do the things that we officially can't do. And yet I'm going like, but you can't say that about the Empire because Darth Vader literally kills people at the drop of a hat and then reinstates somebody else as the admiral. Like there are no rules. Like it's clear, like, there's no real bureaucracy in it. He can do whatever he wants. Yeah. And they're quite happy to have, I'm pretty sure, like, we learn that they've got like death troopers and all this other stuff. Like, he could have this within his own military organization that this thing exists. So I don't know why the bounty hunters are there. They are such a bizarre anomaly now to me in this thing where I'm like, because someone says, like, even one of the military guys says, like, he says to one of us, I don't know, we've got this, like, scum, like, why have we got bounty hunters? And I'm going, I don't know, I really don't know, I can't answer your question.
Well, and then we see Boba Fett briefly, just he doesn't have a word of dialogue, but just, with Darth Vader on Cloud City, and the implication is he called Vader.
Yeah.
And there are stormtroopers we know on the city previously because they shot C-3PO on screen. Okay. But we don't see any of them until after Vader is revealed. And Vader seems to have come with a very small contingent because they hid it from them. Like, that seems very out of character. And it's like Vader has come to Cloud City mostly for the reveal with him at the head of a dinner table, which is like, I kind of love that visual, but it's also
it's great. It's a great reveal.
for it.
Yeah,
it is. Say, sit down, Han. Well, we have a lot to talk about.
So sort of like stroking an imaginary mustache. I mean, it's a great reveal. I mean, I love it as when Han shoots and he sort of blocks the blaster, and he pulls the gun out of his hand. I love all that. It actually looks great. But again, there's a part of me that's sort of saying, like, you invaded the what's it? The shit at the start of the last film, at the very start of New Hope, you literally invade a sort of like a ship and storm it with stormtroopers, and but now you're negotiating with a mining colony. Like, I don't understand, like, how.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Why did you even give Lando the choice?
Yeah.
But I still I don't understand that reveal. It seems to me like it is theatrical. I like it the same way you do, but then I think, why is he doing this himself? Why is he at the head of a table? It feels to me like it's about to set up a dinner scene, and that scene inevitably is going to have the dialogue like, "Tell us where Leia is. Where's Leia?"
Oh, Luke.
Say like, "I don't know, Han. Do you like the chicken? Do you?
Yeah.
Do you?"
Yeah, it needs some. The thing is, it should. This is where I know we rewrite these things, but you're right. This needs to be a scene where they go in, and there is and it shouldn't be between Han. It should be between. This should be the confrontation between Leia and Darth Vader.
Exactly.
This should be that thing of like, where he's like, I can do terrible things, and she's like, yeah, fuck no, you destroyed my home planet. Like, like.
Right, which is never mentioned again.
Yeah, like this should be that confrontation between the leaders of the opposing forces, like Leia versus, and the fact
You're
that
damn right, I'm a rebel. You destroyed my home planet, right?
Exactly. Yeah, like
you tortured me would be nice to mention again.
Yeah, you create. Or if you really want to go to cliche, like, you created me, kind of thing. Like, you, and then to sort of like so when the reveal comes later that she is Vader's daughter. Retrospectively, that scene has more impact. But yeah, it feels sort of like this is where it sort of it feels like it's they sort of just wanted the reveal, but like there's a real missed opportunity there that I think would have been really cool to have that confrontation. So we've gone down the sort of the Han and Leia route, and I sort of feel like I want to sort of just wrap that up briefly because I want to go to Luke, but talk about this stuff, obviously, because then Han is frozen in carbonite, another great image, very iconic. It's a very cool idea. I like the fact that this is another thing about sort of like the Boba Fett and the Empire. So they have this thing of carbonite. They use it for freezing parts, part of the mining process, for the transportation of things like that. And there's a great scene when he is going to be sort of frozen in carbonite. They don't know that it's going to work.
Yeah, I'm confused by that. Like, how do they not know? I mean,
well, they've never frozen a person. They actually say, like, that's not what it's for. And so, because what he wants to do is so the idea is, I think, this might sound, so I'm going to roll this out. Darth Vader wants to freeze Luke in it because that will nullify his Jedi power, so he can then transport him to the Emperor. That's the purpose. But they want to test it on someone, so they're going to test it on Han. And then so there's like, look, if it works, you've got an easy person to transport for.
Right. If not, we'll pay you. Right.
Yeah, but and I like that bit where he's like, well, if it doesn't work, the Empire will compensate you. So I kind of like that like Han's just a test. This whole sort of scene, and I like that sort of like it makes it even more
menacing.
menacing that like he's just he's being dismissed as a test subject. He's a guinea pig for this process. So I kind of like that as well. That again, that goes back to the sort of like the sinister nature of the Empire. Is kind of cool.
The darkness of this movie that like
Yeah.
Him going to be frozen is like a doctor regeneration scene. Like it's a quasi death scene.
Mm.
And it's played out like that in the same way. And I think it works remarkably well.
Mm.
I do wonder, like, is this the, it works for me that it's, you're not important. Obviously, Luke is important. And at this point, it's clear, like, in the parallel narrative, like, has been told, like, oh, no, your friends are in jeopardy because of you, right?
Yeah.
But also, like, screw them. The mission matters more, and they know that.
Mm.
But, so it only makes that even more clear that he's the guinea pig. All that stuff. I do kind of wonder, like, is it the most efficient thing to transport a Jedi in Corvide? I mean, does that not need another sentence explanation or something?
Probably it needs a bit more, but yeah. But I like the fact that with my headcanon, I can fill that in.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, no, I like all that, and obviously that sort of fills out the sort of the the Leia and Han sort of story, because then they rebel and they jump on the Lando sort of redeems himself, but in doing so ruins Cloud City.
Yeah.
Which highlights even more that he was right in the first place. But
you say that, except my problem with that is, it gets back to like Vader as like the worst leader ever.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's supposed to be scary, but I mean, nobody's going to work for somebody who, when they say, right, I can't find this guy, they kill you. They say, apology accepted. Nobody's going to work for this dude. I mean, everybody's going to hear that story and be like, right, we're passing Endor soon. I'm getting off and I'm going AWOL.
Yeah. Well, what I would say is, this is again the first. I watched these obviously a number of times, but that scene and when he kills the admiral and stuff, knowing the prequels, I'm still not a massive fan of the prequels, but that petulance and impetuousness and sort of like dickheadedness of sort of Hayden Christensen's sort of like Anakin Skywalker feels authentic now that I'm watching this, where I'm going like, oh no, this totally feels like I can see that now, that there is that is the same character that would do that kind of thing, where he's just like, I have the power and I'm do whatever I want sort of thing. It feels like a similar character. Doing one-liners after someone's died though feels a little less like kill someone's like apology accepted. There's nobody else in the room, where I'm just like, okay.
Yeah, but I mean, I also think like the same way that I'm troubled by by the sequels not dealing with not having the most basic courage imaginable, which is to deal with the rebels actually having to govern.
Mm-hmm.
I am always troubled. I was always troubled by Darth Vader not seeming to have any concern for what it takes to actually lead anything.
Yeah.
And I mean, it wouldn't take much for him to say like, some sort of like Machiavellian stuff, like people, it's much better to be feared than loved.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't take much to kind of indicate something there.
Look, his philosophy, his leadership philosophy.
Right. And so to the point that you were making about Cloud City, I think, you say like, well, Lando's made a good deal, but it's not a good deal because any deal you make with Vader he's going to welch upon. He's going to, once he's in.
Which he actually says. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, he even acknowledges
change the deal again.
Yeah. So I get that. You
It's
could just say,
you made a deal with the devil. This is the devil. He's a horrible manager. He's never going to keep his word. I mean, he's like the opposite of the Roman Empire, right? Like you hate the Roman Empire, but it is going to keep its deal with you, and it will destroy you if you fight it. But if you make a deal with it, it will respect you and give you the amount of freedom that it has promised you. On the other hand, right? But if the Roman Empire said, "Yeah, no, forget that deal," not that it never did, but and then it's just an evil empire that everybody would fight.
Mm-hmm.
Should have. So I don't know. I mean, I feel.
But this comes back to the thing we've always said that I think we've said this about when we've ever seen these dystopian futures is sort of you need to see the good and the bad.
Mm-hmm.
you need to see the people that are benefiting, like who lives in the sort of like, you know, who lives in the central of this empire that's actually benefiting and actually doing kind of well. Because otherwise, it's like you say, it's just a complete broken bureaucracy, and everyone would fight it. So you need to see the people that are better profiteering and benefiting from this, like who's living the life of luxury.
Yeah, we're only seeing the military of the empire, right? I mean, it's like, you know, you're only seeing the soldiers. You're not seeing, you know, all the planets that are running, the trains run on time.
Which makes me wonder about the motivation of the emperor, like this Sith Lord. I mean, like, what's really his motivation? Is it to make everything as shit as possible, or is it actually like working somewhere? Like, I don't get the point.
So let's talk about the emperor. There's no emperor in the first one.
No, not mentioned. Really,
out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Darth Vader just says, "Move the ship out of the asteroid field so we can make a clear transmission," which is more dumb than you can imagine. You know, like it. You know, I don't know how an asteroid field isn't a collection of asteroids 20 feet apart, but the asteroid field doesn't screw with your transmissions. But anyway, then you have this emperor suddenly introduced. You know, and the emperor says, "Anakin Skywalker." How could that be? Says Vader. None of this is natural dialogue if Anakin is Darth Vader, right?
Yeah.
They would not. I mean, it seems so stilted and absurd to retcon the Emperor in this scene and then have this horribly stilted dialogue if the film knows what's going to be revealed by the end.
Well, this is where this film is one of the biggest continuity blockers for the prequels, as well as you know I've said about the character of Vader sort of being okay. I can see that version of Anakin, but you're right in the sense that, like, you know, there are several points in the first one we've been told about that Anakin Skywalker was a great pilot and died in the fighting and all this other stuff, was killed by Vader, and then in this one, you know, we get a notion that Obi-Wan was trained by Yoda. We'll get to that. But then also, like you say, this whole thing of who Vader is, and you know, obviously, it's then revealed later on at the end of the film, he is Anakin Skywalker. You know, I am your father. That's not the dialogue that was said by Chris Prowse, Dave Prowse, when he was filming. But that's, you know, granted, he had sort of, you know, broad Bristolian accent and, you know, knew he was going to, but he didn't know the proper script. What he says is, "Yes, I killed your father." That's what he said on set. And it wasn't until he saw the film at the premiere that it was revealed that, like, you know, only James Earl Jones knew that dialogue. So you're right. The whole film is set up to keep this reveal, even from the people in the film. And so when you watch it back, you're a bit like, it feels like they're trying to do that. It feels clunky enough that that's what they're trying to do. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's kind of like the prequel thing with the, you know, actors acting on a green screen and you know, I mean, Lucas gets blamed overly much for that because there wasn't that much green screening in the prequels, you know, compared to these days. But, you know, this whole trend of people not knowing what the hell they're reacting to, and just having to say their lines in a void, you know, sort of begins here. And obviously, he didn't direct this. It's not fair to throw this all.
No, but he was a producer. He was influencing the story and that sort of thing. Like, he's there.
But the whole revelation doesn't really work. And it seems to me that, I mean, obviously it's so famous, but it seems to me that it's so clear that the first movie does not know this. And it's so clear that most drafts of this movie, including much of the finished movie, does not know this reveal.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Let's talk about Luke. Let's go back before we get to this reveal. Let's talk about Luke, because obviously we've talked about Luke at the beginning being the sort of, like, you know, he's much more in charge. He feels much more confident and you know, a different kind of character. He has grown. I like the fact that it shows growth and stuff. He's still doing sort of slightly whiny things, but what's interesting, that the character that you get in the first 40 minutes, this sort of like accomplished pilot and sort of like respected by the resistance, and he sort of made his connections, and you see him with the pilots and, you know, whatever, reverts to what we got from the first film once he gets to Dagobah. And it becomes very frustrating again, where I'm like, hang on, what happened to the guy? We're getting that whiny 19-year-old again. Where's the guy that I've just seen fighting the resistance and fighting the thing? Now we've got this stroppy guy again who's sort of like, oh, okay, it's too hard, it's too big, or whatever. So he gets that. But the first thing I want to say, he goes to Dagobah, and this is another thing, sort of like, how does he find? It's a planet, all right, the planet of Dagobah. He just happens to crash land within a sort of a walking distance of where Yoda lives.
Yes, so brilliant. I love that observation.
Again, I'm like, one line could change that. Simply saying, the Force is directing me to this part of the planet.
Right. Yeah.
This is where I believe Yoda is. Done. Okay, I'm buying that because we've shown that the Force can do these things, so fine. But to have no dialogue or anything to explain that, just.
Well, this is where the stupidity of Star Wars really shines, right? I mean, it's like, yeah, it's bad enough that you have this space worm in an asteroid. How the hell did that evolve in an asteroid? What is it feeding on to keep itself alive? Why is gravity inside the space worm sideways? That's what I want to know. Like, seriously, you're in an asteroid. Why? Sideways? I mean, none of that's important because it's fantasy and it doesn't really matter. And you can, and we just talked about the Haas sequence, how we are willing to forgive an awful lot. It's not that you have to be, have physicists on staff that or something. But just like with this point you're making, this is not a planet they're visiting. This is a little set. This is a little area of a fantasy world. This is not really science fiction, And it's in these moments that you're pointing out where the whole tapestry of Star Wars starts to break down for me.
No, you're right, and that's the thing, when you say this is fantasy, that's what you accept. Like you've you've gone inside the great whale, and that you can, all you have to wear is a breather. Like you haven't got to protect your eyes or your ears or anything like that. The atmosphere's, I don't know.
And there's an ecology of flying manta rays in there.
Yeah, inside this thing. But going to Dagobah again, this thing of they crash land and they find Yoda, and again Yoda is this comedy little green wizard. Like you said, that's what he is. This feels like the fantasy thing. They've gone this thing and they've gone, we've got this race of things that Yoda was this great Jedi. But the whole bit at the beginning, and this is where again I watch this time because I've seen obviously the prequels. I've seen this sort of a much more competent and together and in charge Yoda. That's what you've got in the prequels. Yeah. And you go well, what's the difference? This is 20 years later. All right, what the hell happened in 20 years that he's gone senile?
Feral.
Yeah.
No, I had the same thought, and watching this again, I was like, oh my god, we think of Yoda as that guy. Right? Think of Yoda as such a badass that the Mandalorian can be here's a baby version of Yoda, and he's a badass too. He's killing things left and right. Don't mess with him. He's a psychic kid. And here Yoda's introduced, and I'm like, oh, this is a third-rate Jim Henson character puppet.
Yeah,
it's just
yeah.
I'm a little troll who's going to steal your food.
But that's exactly what I thought. It was when he starts.
I watch it.
Yeah, he starts. I mean, I kind of like it. It's funny in the sense of like you say, the Jim Henson Muppet. I like the puppetry on it. I've always admired the puppetry of this. But when he starts hitting R2, he's like, mine it is, and I'm just like, what is this? This character? What's happened in this? I'm sure there's lore, and I'm pretty sure there are certain people I could go to that's like, what happened between, return what's it like Sith and this, what happened in that 20-year period that drove him to become this, what happened?
You can say that, but it doesn't matter because it's not in the movies, right?
No, it's not in the movie, but I'm sure there's canon that tells me that. But you're right, it's not in the film, it doesn't tell you. So you are watching this sort of crazy character, but there are moments when they go into the house, they go into Yoda's little house and stuff, and Luke's having pitching a bit of a fit, what am I doing here? I should be out looking for Master Yoda. And I'm just like, shut up, you ingrate. You were just such an irritating person. And that's when Yoda's going there should be a switch. Because then he says, like, he obviously communicates with the ghost of Ben, Obi-Wan, and he says, like, train him I cannot. Like, he is, he's too impatient. And if you like, he basically, if he was to turn around and be like, everything I've done for you now is a test. Like, I was just,
Right.
like, I wanted to assess you without you judging me, but you judged me based on these things. You're clearly sort of like not ready to be a Jedi Master. Like, here you are judgmental. You are sort of guided by the emotion, blah, 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 blah. And then be a much more stable character. And he sort of does do that, but there's still moments when it's sort of like he slips back to that sort of the silly character.
I had the same thought. It's
and I'm like,
there is that explanation. Is this all a test? Was that all a fake out?
Yeah, that's how I take it.
There are those elements that keep coming back where it's like clear. This wasn't all a fake out, was it?
Yeah, he's clearly senile, but like, and he's sort of, but there's those moments of clarity where sort of like, because he says like, about 800 years I have trained Jedi Masters and all this other stuff, and you're like, oh, cool, there's, this background, and he's clearly a wizard. He's clearly like, this is clearly influenced by Lord of the Rings and all those sort of fantasy films. This is your Gandalf because we've got rid of Obi-Wan Kenobi. And so but I like those things, but I really do feel this disconnect of watching it now when he's sort of like that sort of like slightly silly character, but he hits home way more. There's a great scene, and this is where I love the puppetry, because it's a puppet, it's rubber. This thing's bloody rubber. Mm-hmm. But there's a great scene when he's been doing his training and he's been running and doing all the flips and all this other stuff. Like, and this is another thing that I find hilarious. It's like this thing about matching the Force and all this other stuff, but it's always about physicality. Like, they have to do a visual representation of what he's doing. So it can't just be sat and meditating or having a discussion or like study. Like, it has to be some sort of physical representation of training, sort of this montage. But there's the bit where he feels the dark side of the Force and he goes into the forest to face his dark side or wherever it is, the sort of the test at the end of it. And yes,
is that the test? It's not supposed to be the end of it.
I don't know. I've got questions. I don't know.
Not a test.
But he faces a Darth Vader, doesn't he? He faces that version of Darth Vader, and it's sort of him in the mask, and it's a vision quest kind of thing. Like, and I understand that what it's for. But the point is, the point I want to make is about Yoda that I really like, because Yoda says, "Your weapons you do not need. Like, you don't need your weapons because I don't want you to fight." And Luke ignores him and sort of looks back and takes him in anyway. And the reaction that they give Yoda, where he just sort of like, he's not angry, I think he just goes, like, it's a moment of like, okay, this is who you are. And then when it ends and he sort of strikes out at Darth Vader with his lightsaber, and he sort of sees the mask collapses and it explodes into the face of Luke inside it, and he confronts her. And again, it goes back to Yoda, and Yoda's going, so that's what you saw. Like, he knows. And it's this sort of like, there's almost this thing of him sat there going, you're clearly not, he knows at that point, like, yeah, you're not the one that's going to bring balance to the Force.
Right. That's right.
Like, and I like the fact that they've done that. Like, in all that time, there's like, there's no, this is what goes back to the darkness of this film. Like, there's no celebratory moment where, Yoda's like, you are the one, Neo, you are the one kind of thing. There's a real moment of like Yoda going like, no, this kid's not the one.
I don't interpret it that way. I don't interpret it as like he's not the one, because you do have the later conversations. I mean, I really fucking hate Force Ghosts. Like, it's just so terrible beyond imagination.
Well, they came about simply. It feels to me like Force Ghosts came about because they were like, we killed Obi-Wan Kenobi, but we need him to be an active part of the rest of the story, so we're going to have to bring him back somehow.
I mean, I can deal with the vision of Luke's vision of Ben on Hoth, because it's like it's a dying vision, and he's like, maybe I'm crazy, maybe this is spiritual, I'm going after this. Okay, and of course in the Star Wars universe, let's be crystal clear how damaging this shit is. Everything spiritual is true.
Yeah.
But then, this whole conversation with, extended conversation between Yoda and, Force Ghost Ben, where, they do have this conversation after what you're talking about, where they're like, well, no, he's not ready. My interpretation isn't like, no, he's not the one, he's not the Messiah. But that he, like, if he is, he's clearly not ready. He's still this angry young man and a whiny young man. And, you know, it's almost like the challenge. I wonder, like, how was that encounter with Vader? Like, it doesn't even mean anything. It's like a cool visual that somebody came up with and kept in the script, but it doesn't mean anything to me. It means more to you, and I don't know that you're wrong, but I think that's a really awesome interpretation. And I do think, you know, the way the story should have gone is Luke fails and Leia is the one, right? That's clearly where Star Wars was supposed to go.
Oh, this film totally feels like that's the way it's supposed to have gone. Like watching this film right to the end, I'm like, yeah, when we learn that they are brother and we now know, you know, when we learn they're brother and sister and stuff, like I totally feel like that's how the end of the story, the Return of the Jedi should be.
Well, and I sort of feel like that's how the sequels should have been after the Jedi. Like, Return of the Jedi is the end of Luke's story, but the sequels are like, oh no, he is corrupted by the power. You know, he's the Emperor. He's the Emperor. He's running the show. He's too close to Darth Vader. He's too quick to anger. He's not going to run this effectively, and Leia's going to have to resist him and come into her own. But that's my, you know, imaginary sequels.
Well, even the thing is, this is the thing as well that's never played up and should be. Like, this whole thing's about balance, right? And this is where, again, I sort of, even as when I was younger and I read some of the legend novels and stuff, like, you have twins.
Yeah.
It's identified that they are twins.
One's good, one's bad.
Yeah, and so you don't have to, but it doesn't have to be extremes. It just be the balance comes from them being the counter to one another.
Exactly.
So they act they act as joint leadership of this thing where, like you say, yeah, Luke has accepted sort of like he's further into the dark. And by the end of the, you know, Leia wears what, I know she's on an ice planet, but throughout this film she's wearing white. Luke's gets dirtier and dirtier. Like, to me, I was reading this theme where I'm like, oh, he's traveling on that path. Like, anger and emotion is always going to be a part of Luke. She's clearly the sort of more, she's defined by her mission. She's defined by sort of the thing. Like, they should be a pairing. This whole thing should be about the twins and how the balance is struck by not a single person, but by two people. This film tells me that's what they should be doing.
Well, and that would be much more, I mean, for as much as people criticize The Last Jedi, and I think it's a shit film from start to finish. Having said that, I have a lot of admiration for the underlying ideas that I don't think come out in that movie, of how, this whole light side, dark side thing does not work, right? This is a false dichotomy. It was never really true in Star Wars. And actually watching this, I think that's crystal clear here. You know, and I think what you're talking about would be a far more satisfying. It's almost like this is already there in the canon. This is there in Empire. You know, I mean, I always kind of hated all this Jedi stuff, especially like all the Yoda stuff. I think is just kind of terrible. Like, I like the idea that the small, weird-looking, ugly guy is the most powerful one, right? Like, that's kind of affirming and feels good, and, you know, pro-diversity and stuff, and I really like that. But all the Jedi philosophy is like, did you get this on the back of a Cracker Jack bag? Like, you know, it really hurts. It's so stupid.
Well, it's inconsistent, isn't it?
Damaging.
Yeah, well, it's inconsistent. That's the biggest thing, because it's faux Eastern philosophy, isn't it? It's sort of like, okay, we're going to take Taoism or Buddhism or whatever, and we're going to sort of make some, Confucius kind of statements repeatedly, but they don't match up. Like we've said in the first film, you get like, or, you know, well, I don't know if it's in the first one, or this one, but like, you know, they are the Sith. They sort of they deal in absolutes. You know, okay, cool. Okay, that's their thing then. Everything's black and white. And then in this film, you have Yoda going like, there is do or do not. There is no try. And you go, hang on, that's literally
and a dark side, and those are absolutes too, right?
So you know.
So I just want to go through just a few of these. Yoda says that the Jedi, first of all, there is no Sith in this. The Sith do not exist. It is crystal clear there's no Sith. Vader wants to ditch the Emperor. He wants to get his son to be his like assistant and train him and defeat the Emperor. But it's not because the Sith always are in pairs and all this nonsense. It's just this dumb surrogate emperor that they invented for this movie. But anyway, Yoda says that the Jedi use the Force for good, Force for knowledge and peace, never to attack. Right. I've never seen a Jedi attack anybody. I've never seen a Jedi in a fight. Never seen that. Right? It's like, what movie are you in? Have you watched any of these Star Wars movies?
But can I say that they never for attack? Yet we were clearly involved in the Clone Wars, and we've already stated that in the first film. So carry on.
I mean, with this whole like try not, do or don't do, there is no try. All right. Guess those cancer patients are fucked.
Yeah.
You know, if you get cancer, you better recover, or you just didn't try hard enough, buddy. You know, we all get the life that we deserve based on how hard you try. And then, you know, I think, what about Elizabeth Holmes, who had Yoda, you know, who had Yoda on her wall in her stupid criminal enterprise? And this was the idea, the underlying idea, do or don't do, there is no try. My medical team can just come up with a scientific breakthrough and I'll defraud investors and I will get it to work, because you just have to try hard enough. And if you can't come up with this medical breakthrough, it's because you didn't try.
Yeah. I mean, well, no, it's not about trying. It's not about trying. It's about doing, isn't it? It's about achieving. Right. It's about achieving. Because I thought the same. Because again, one of the things is like, you know, they talk about, this is the thing that like where it falls down even before you even get to that, right? The film itself doesn't believe this statement, because if there is do or do not, then there's no training.
Yes.
Because you either can or you cannot. There is no try. Well, if you're not going to get to try, then you don't know. So why are you bothering to train people? Because you're saying that there should be an innate talent to do this. So why train a Jedi? Because you need to train them, and yet you're training him to levitate things. It's one of the dumbest statements, but people quote it all the time. It's one of the dumbest statements of the Star Wars franchise. I hate it.
I hate it too, and I think and it's real. I just think it's really damaging, and I think that, you know, especially in a country that perpetuates this idea of like it's a meritocracy and you rise to the level that you're at. This is that damaging idea, you know. And I think what we need much more is compassion for people who don't necessarily make it. Like, good for you for trying. What's important is you try. You give it your all. You know, at the end of the day, whether you meet that goal or not, it's great. Sometimes being the best is important, and kudos to you. But, you know, and passing a threshold is important in certain situations. Having said that, like, we need way more compassion and way more understanding for the process.
Yeah.
Than just,
the process.
Hey,
Thank you.
You're not.
That's
Screw
yeah.
You. I have the Ferrari. You don't. So what would Yoda say about the two of us? Go suck it.
Yeah, but the thing is, again, like even, you know, he's trying to teach him this idea of. He says like, you know, I cannot teach him. Okay, well, if you're going to teach someone, well, that means he can't do then. So you've got to try. You know, this whole statement makes it sound because you're trying to teach him to levitate, but he's also saying to him when he goes to leave. When he does when he goes to leave to save Han and Leia and stuff, it's like, you're not ready. So this whole point should be about, you know, okay, look, I'm going to give you the test is raising the X-Wing out of the swamp. Mm-hmm. If you can do that, you have shown me that you are ready, and you have sort of at least to sort of like this first part. Yeah, that should be the thing, like, you know, because forget this do or do not. There is no try. Like, no, it should be try. Try and show. The thing should be try and prove to me that you have learned. Show to me that you have taken on the lessons. Of course, try. In fact, you know, it should be do or do not is not important. Trying is the driving factor. Like, show me that you've learned. Show me that you've progressed in your journey, and then we can discuss you leaving to go save your friends. It's just this one statement just defies everything that is. And I know it's been nitpicking in a silly adventure film, but like, it just bothers me, that point.
Yeah, but I mean, keep in mind, you know, look, we can't blame this for prequels and sequels.
No.
Culture that came out of it, but I mean, we have people who claim that their religion is Jedi. Okay. Yeah. I mean, if it believes this, it's an evil religion. Now, I mean, I don't believe that. I think people probably really cool.
Yeah.
Are like, I'm a Jedi, man. Like, okay, I don't believe that. But my point is, I do think it's really damaging. And to your point that the movie doesn't believe it, think about on a meta level, what is this movie about? And what do I admire this movie? It's that it fails. The heroes fail.
Yeah.
And it ends on a really somber note of like, the story's incomplete. Han's screwed up. Luke's training isn't done. He's lost a hand. He's embarrassed. This is not going well. And, do or don't do, there is no try. No, they tried and they failed.
Yeah.
And the whole movie is about failing.
Exactly. And the point is, again, that, and we'll get to the end of it because I do want to talk about that final shot. But one of the things that's important, like, Luke, because I'm talking at the time, so Luke does go to Cloud City. He sort of takes on, there's a bit of a Die Hard moment where he goes around sort of like taking out sort of like stormtrooper stuff. I kind of like all that stuff. It's kind of good. It's fun. And so we're back to the adventure side of things. It works kind of well. What I would say is I actually really like his fight with Darth Vader. Now, I would say that Darth should, for all intents and purposes, kill him in a second.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where, so when Vader sort of like, Vader should be sort of like, it should be clear that you're not ready, pulls the lightsaber out of his hand using his own force skills, and then just kills Luke. Like, it should be that. But I like the fact that it's almost like Vader is sort of like tolerating him. It's almost a test in and of itself, where he's like, all right, let's see what you've got, kid. I'm not particularly scared of this. I'm going to take this on as a fight. And then, because then the reveal leads up to sort of like, I was never going to kill you. I wanted to beat you down to show you how powerful I am, and then give you this opportunity to come back. And so I like it on that front, because the other thing I like about this fight is it's clumsy.
Mm-hmm.
And people sort of praise the third film, the Sith film, for there's a fight scene between Obi-Wan and Anakin where it's all twists and jumps and turns, and I'm like, yeah, those are two very skilled, very sort of proficient sword fighters. That's the whole point. This is sort of different, and so that when Vader's using his force powers to throw things at Luke, and you have like Luke sort of like turning his back and getting hit at like awkward angles, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what happened. Like, that's how this would feel. Like, it feels a bit more authentic. That, like, it's not choreographed in a sort of smooth, slick way. It feels lumpy and clunky and sort of awkward. And so I kind of respect it for that. That it's showing that Luke isn't this skilled fighter at this point. Like, he's still untrained and awkward, and it's sort of like, this isn't a slick fight. So I like all that stuff as well. I sort of appreciate that.
Yeah, I think the version that you're describing is like the fight that I want this to be. And, I would say it's the cat and mouse thing, right? Like, I want Vader to be exactly as you say, right? Like, he's tolerating him. It's a very one-sided fight, and it should be, and that would lead up to that revelation better. I don't always feel that it commits to that. I think that
that's true.
Yeah, and I think I would just say that the things being thrown around the room kind of look cheap. Like, there's a clumsiness to it that you like, but there's a clumsiness in the staging of it that I don't like. This window's blown out, and Luke goes flying out through the window, and so I think, first of all, that obviously could have killed Luke. Luke is going out, wandering out, and then throws himself to his death. I mean, obviously, Vader's not being very careful in this cat and mouse game, right? Yeah. But the other thing is, why is there explosive decompression?
Inside.
You're in the clouds, right? Yeah. You're in a planet, right? Yeah. You've forgotten you're not on a space station, dude. Like, oh my God, that bothered me this time.
I didn't even think about that so actually. I just was like, oh, they get blown out the window. But yeah, that's a really good point. They're not on a Death Star. They're not on a spaceship or space station. Like, no, they're literally probably like several hundred feet up, or a couple of miles up or whatever. Like, it's not that level. Yeah. Especially because it's inside as well. Like, it's still inside. It's not like it's not even an exterior window. It's an interior window. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. But
look, I know it's a nitpick, but
it's kind of like,
Yeah, you.
Yeah, at this point, but the thing is, if that is if you're noticing that, because I hadn't even thought about that, but if you're noticing that, then you're clearly not engaging with what they're presenting you. So that's a failing on their part. What I would say is, I do kind of, maybe it's even headcanon. Like I've added to this scene for my own purposes, but that's how I take it. Like it's almost like a cat and mouse. Doesn't and you get moments. It's almost like you get those things of like with say like Rocky in every fight. Like if this was a wrestling match, you have to have the moment where the good guy gets the sort of like the shine. They get a bit of comeback, and you get that. Like Luke gets his moment where he sort of like he pushes Darth Vader, and Darth Vader's like, oh, well, actually, Christ, he's actually pretty good. Like there's something here. Like he proves himself. And then that's when Darth Vader like elevates it. Like, well, I'm just gonna start throwing stuff at you. Like I'm gonna teach you a lesson, kind of thing. And so I take it in that way that he's testing Luke and stuff. And then offers because at the end of the fight, like when Luke is backing off, like it doesn't take him much to chop his hand off because that feels a bit like, all right, I'm done. Like I'm sort of done with playing now. Off your hand goes, and then he gives him the information, like Obi-Wan never told you about your father, and you get the whole reveal. And then you get Mark Hamill given a rather overacted sort of like no, and that is sort of it's fine and that, but like. Again, this is where sort of like Luke, I am your father, and again, this is that continuity thing where it's like, okay, well, he's known he's called Skywalker the whole film, even in the first film, like you get this thing where I'm a bit like, I don't get like how this naming convention thing works. Like, is Skywalker a common? I know this is again a stupid thing. Like, if you were to be like, this is Bob Smith, and I'm your father, Fred Smith. Like, there's a lot of names that but like Skywalker feels very specific, and it's the fact it's been a bit of a thing for a while. Like, I don't know, but like
also like the best way, like I guess with Leia, I mean, she was adopted by the Senator Organa,
yeah, that's
law dude, who I love.
Mm.
And but in the case of Luke Skywalker, they're like, yeah, just put him on Tatooine, with Obi-Wan will watch over him. Don't bother changing his last name. Nobody will come looking.
Yeah, yeah. He's not. It's the fact he was adopted and looked after, not even by strangers, like you say, like with Leia, but like literally by his, Anakin's stepbrother. Like it's not even like it's not even distant.
Like fan out and search for my relative.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know there's canon in the comics and books that explain all this, but I don't care. It's not in the film.
You can always have some explanation for some
Yeah.
shit if you have enough people writing and noticing.
Yeah, exactly. But
you're right. I mean, in addition to the stupid scene with the Emperor, where they're talking about Anakin and Vader clearly as different people, including to somebody who is both of those people, who does not correct or say I, at any point. Then there's also the conversation with the Obi-Wan Force Ghost, and it pains me to say these words, who's pleading with Luke not to go. And he's, they're like, look, Luke is going off to his death. They're talking about the risks of the dark side. You're going to lose your friends. You're going to lose yourself. The cause is going to be lost. All will die. The universe will be out of balance forever if you leave. And why would you not say at that point, like, your father went to the dark side.
Mm-hmm.
This is the entire universe is at stake. Don't go, baby. Let me tell you the truth. Like, your father went to the dark side. He's Vader. How did they not say that at that point?
I don't know, but this comes back to this whole thing about the communication, doesn't it? And again, I do wonder if like there's all this sort of thing of like they brought James Earl Jones in and gave him the script, made him do the lines, all this other stuff. And again, I don't know all the behind the scenes. I wonder if they had him read two versions. Where there was a version where James Earl Jones does say, I killed your father. And this was going to be a revenge story of, Luke going after Vader for the death of Anakin Skywalker. And then there was that thing of like, should we, shouldn't we? We don't know if we're going to do it. And they eventually did it. I don't know. But it feels a bit like they were trying to sort of cover both bases. And Force covering, keeping people in the dark. Because yeah, this is again where like Obi-Wan's the worst kind of mentor. Like the Jedi are manipulative. They withhold information. Like and I know these are all sort of like factors that people will bark at and go like, but it's true. Like Obi-Wan he lies by omission. Like he holds back information repeatedly, as does Yoda.
Yeah.
And so you're a bit like, oh, you are just a pair of manipulative old men that just looking to sort of use Luke, where you could be actually like, this is your life mission. This is who you could be. You are sort of prophesied as being the chosen one or whatever, the one that brings balance to the Force. Like give that sort of like give him his true legacy mission, but they never do.
Yeah, and I think that would have been a more interesting, or at least a different movie. I mean, but, as you say, like they are manipulative. I mean, here we have like Vader is a really bad manager. He's a really bad guy. In senses. He's not a bad guy, but he's a guy who is a really good big bad character. He's not a good leader of an empire.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you want to say the Emperor's there, whatever, Vader in effect is leading it. He's not a good bad guy in that context. And Luke and Obi-Wan and Yoda are not good mentors in the good guy context.
No.
And it's not just that they lie and omit key information that somebody deserves to know before they go into a setting where it's a key factor, but also that they do it while talking about truth and knowledge.
Yeah.
Like how evil can you get? Like,
yeah. Well, that's what I mean. It doesn't know its own philosophy, and like you say, later books will retcon this and fix it and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things as well, I just want to finish on this note, because there's obviously this thing that the offer that Darth Vader makes to Luke is join the dark side, and we will rule the universe together as father and son. And you go, okay, all right, whatever. That's sort of the offer that's been made. One of the things that made me think about the sort of the descent of Anakin in the original sort of films, the growth of his anger and his frustration and his petulance, and the eventual sort of like the death of his mother, and then the sort of like the death of Padme and stuff. Like it's clunky storytelling. It's not fantastic. Like some of the films are really awful, but I buy, to an extent, this idea that there has been a series of events over a period of time that actually made the dark side appealing. Like he is sort of like, he sees that there's a benefit to the dark side, this idea of saving Padme because she's going to die. And he's seen his mother die. So he's like, okay, well, I don't want to experience that grief again. So I want to have a way of manipulating the life force of people so that I can save lives. Like, it's that thing of like doing a bad thing for the right reason sort of thing. Like they're trying to get to that, aren't they? That's the fall of Anakin. And it happens over a period of time. Like, he's, again, it's sort of the frustration of everything. So it's not fantastic storytelling, but it's a descent. It is an absolute spiral into darkness. I don't know why he would think, like, Luke doesn't seem to have, there's no offer. There's nothing there where it's like, I can save your friends. We can do, it's just a case of, we will rule together. It's so sort of like greed centric, power centric, that I don't know why the offer is sort of like, why this should feel like a valid offer. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not like, yeah.
No, I mean, what's fascinating is I think you make an awesome point. I think it's an excellent point, and I think especially bringing in prequels, that is the key thing that's fantastic in the prequels. Is what else you think about them. They do tell that story that they set out to tell, and it is that sort of descent. And there's a character arc with key beats, and it goes where it needs to go. And you're right. It does try to sell it as, justifying it, not just I've chosen to be evil now, and that makes sense. But, the same reason why there is this kind of like sales job in that third prequel film of the Emperor saying, we can rule together, we can do good things. That's the key thing that I find missing here. So you find missing a kind of like offer, which would be very easy for him to make. especially coming from that place. If we want to retroactively go back, I find missing, like, why does Luke not consider this? I find the offer, I'd be like, oh, I'm taking that offer today. Like, I mean, instantly. I'd be like, look, how much authority am I going to have? Look, I know you're used to ruling stuff, but I've got ideas about how you should run this empire. You know, let's talk about amnesty for my friends. Well, that's smart people. Let's talk about ways that they could be integrated into a better, smarter empire that maybe is a little less abusive, maybe can change some of these policies that we've had problems with. You know, could I influence things at your side like that? How much authority will I have? Or do you just want me to be a baddie bad in your model, which I think is what's being offered here.
But that's the
never a discussion of that. I
that
be like, okay, let's negotiate.
Well, this is where, and maybe again, if they knew what they were really doing, and again, this is just jumped into my head right now. We've talked about the confrontation that should exist between Leia and Darth Vader, right? If you really want to make Darth Vader this cat and mouse thing, right, really be this Machiavellian thing where he's trying to undermine the emperor, right? This would make Darth Vader so much more manipulative. Have him know that who Leia and Luke are. All right, have him have this whole plan of he wants to sort of take out the emperor, but he wants to rule, and this idea of balance of good and bad, this idea of having both sides represented. Instead of being in a single person, it has to be a duality. There has to be the yin and yang, the good and the bad. Have him recognize that he is the bad. He is always going to represent the dark side, right? That was his that is his destiny. In the balance of things, he was always destined to represent the dark side. So he needs a counter, and have him confronting, like he's been testing and you know, manipulating things so that he can test the twin children. Who is going to rule by his side? Is it going to be Leia? Is it going to be Luke? And have that be the sort of the dynamic. So really, like, he's almost going to put the two children in conflict, and that's going to be. And then, but then the end of the story should be that actually it's the twins that end up ruling, and Luke becoming the dark side and Leia becoming the light. That is a dynamic I want to see, where like Darth Vader's like, do you know what? I've known all this information for years. I've known exactly where you are. This has always been destined to happen in this way. You know, I've set things in motion. That's why I have to use. That's why I have to use bounty hunters, because I can't have certain information. I don't trust. I don't trust that I can use the military complex because things might get back to the Emperor. I have to use these bounty hunters because I can secrete information. This is all a game that I'm playing, or this is my big plan for me to usurp the Emperor and then have someone rule at my side that represents the good and the bad to provide balance across the universe.
Right. I mean,
that's the destiny. That would be that should be the destiny. That should be the thing. This acknowledgement of, you know, that Yoda's wrong. There is no absolutes. You're right. There is good and bad, and there has to be a decision between the two.
Yeah, I mean, I've never understood this decision between the two. You know, this like is the bad side more powerful? Like, well, they have the same set of powers. You know,
they just choose not to use them. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I don't know. I mean, I find this idea that like good and evil are natural. Like, you know, no, I mean, a weapon does what it does. A power does what it does. I mean, I can pound a nail in or I can smash a skull in. You know, these are two amoral choices. They're moral because of our society looking at them, but they are the same hand stroke. You know, the consequences might be differently more, but like, it's not nature positive and negative. But I like what you're saying, and I think it would make a lot more sense than what we get. But I mean, definitely like that twin thing, you know, is not ever really explored. And
no, right, not even the sequels, not even the sequel trilogy do they really explore it when they really should do.
And also, you know, it seems so clear that Luke is going to the bad side, right?
Yeah.
But they can't do that because you bought the figures, right? I mean, that's the real thing is, you know, you had kids who grew up with, I mean, I had a Empire Strikes Back, you know, bed sheet, man. You go like, all right, 8-year-old, your hero is the next Darth Vader, man. Like,
can you imagine that? Can you imagine that if this is how it went, like, you know, and there was a review, because even the sequels, I'm thinking about the sequels, you've got, what's the name, Rey and Kylo Ren. That's the same relationship. it shouldn't be, oh, there's a worry of like they're in conflict. No, they should be the end result of this should be a joint balance between the dark light and the dark. That's the point. And it should even be revealed that the Jedi were wrong. The Jedi were wrong for generations. It was never about an individual. It was always about a balance between right, left and right, dark and side, to find that balance to make the best possible. It's because it should be this story should be about compromise. Like, there are grey areas, and you need influences from both sides to try and understand the best way of managing these things. I don't know. It just feels a bit like, they keep dallying around the edges of this concept and never really get into it.
Well, and I think that the key problem there is that they have not thought through their own material.
Yeah.
But
it wasn't intended to be that thing. It was still an adventure film, wasn't it? That's the thing.
Well, that's true. But, I mean, I think you should think through at least your own material when it comes to maybe not, incorporation of Taoism.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, certainly your own material when it comes to your family's, your characters' familiar relationships. I mean, you should kind of know that and know the implications of that. And this doesn't. I mean, and it's just like, it just needs more work.
Yeah.
Having said that, like, there are these ideas here that we really like, and I don't think that this is a bad film. I mean, I feel like the first Star Wars is just embarrassing, and there's stuff that I like in it. There's stuff that's beautiful. There's stuff that's like awesome, cool ideas. You can see why kids would love, but it's just filled with it just trips over itself time and time again. It's painful for me to watch. This is painful in places, but like there's so much more promise here. Like this is actually like I feel like this is actually a movie.
Yes.
It's a good movie in places and a bad movie in places and just a decent adventure movie in places. And it has all the problems we've talked about, but it's a movie. It functions as a movie in a basic way that I feel the first one doesn't.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think this is clearly a step up from the original one. I'm just aware of time, so let's sort of wrap up this. Let's see, any final thoughts then on Empire Strikes Back?
One thing that we didn't talk about that I'd like to say is talking about Leia. And, I credit my friend for some of these observations that, Leia, is very strong and she's not sexualized.
No.
Which is so weird for 1980. Yeah,
give it one more movie.
That's true. But see, here's the thing. And then we were talking and seeing like how her costumes and her attitude changes over the movie. And I was like, well, there's this trope of strong women who, as soon as their love interest gets serious, they start, becoming weaker. And, suddenly Leia's in like flowing dresses instead of like a military uniform. And like, right. So, and then by the third one, she's a slave girl,
Yeah. Yes. So we'll get to that one day. We'll talk about that again. Yeah.
But you have share a final observation that because, sometimes we end these and then you like have a killer thing that if I let you run for like 3 minutes, you would just like blown the internet to smithereens. And
no, I just think this is watching it this time. One of the things is really for me is just the missed potential of this. Like I watch this and we've talked about it today, and I'm like, there is a journey of Star Wars that is much more consistent and much more interesting of this idea of balance. And especially if it's diving into sort of Eastern philosophy, like it really should have it should have been obvious to sort of go, that's what this is about, like yin and yang. Like it's not that the Jedi were always right and stuff. It's like explore the fact that actually, and I think especially in today's politics, with this idea of sort of like left and right and wokeism and cancel culture and all this other stuff of being on the left is good and being on the right is bad, and yes, you and I have much more liberal leanings, but like I still look at certain things within woke culture and cancel culture where I'm like, yeah, there's a nuance missing in this on both sides, on the extremes of both sides, and that's what this film could have been. This series could have been about, that nuance of balance between light and the dark. And I feel that that's really what sort of, and I also think like Darth Vader could have been a much more interesting character if there's that thing. But it's good. I do like this film. Again, I'll just say, this is an adventure film. That first 40 minutes, all the stuff on Hoth, really good. Like I really enjoy all of it. Like it really gets me hooked in. I can see why people think this is the best of the original trilogy. It works for the most part. It's just when it sort of goes off into its own philosophy and things like that, it starts to sort of fall apart in bits. Like I think I enjoy the bits with Han and Leia and Lando more than I do the stuff with Luke. It's a much more interesting story, and I think it actually works better. But I like the fact that this does end on it's brave. It ends. The thing I was going to say is the end shot. Like it ends on. We said you said like it's a down note. It ends on that sort of thing of failure. But one of the things that I find interesting is it does, but it ends on sort of like but it's also an optimistic ending. Because it's not a sort of like, no one's sort of like wringing their hands and weeping. It's a sort of like you get up, dust yourself off. Luke has got he's got his new robotic hand, and that will be explored as a sort of like, a step towards his father type thing. But it ends with them saying like, we will find Han. We will carry on. The resistance will carry on. Like, yes, we've had a setback, but we will carry on. And I like that as almost like as a positive note of like, failure isn't the end. Failure isn't sort of like the end. This is the cliffhanger. We will pick this up. And so I like that like it's brave enough to have the heroes fail, but not to completely destroy them. You know what I mean? It's sort of so yeah, that's what I like about the ending of this film.
Yeah, and that I love what you just said, and it is the opposite of do or don't do. There is no try.
Exactly. Yeah, which is the worst statement in this film.
Well, and it's also true in so many of our lives that victory and nobility is defined as getting back up again. You don't. So many people give up because they're not a natural at something. And you need to get knocked down, and you need to learn how to get back up again to get really better, and to not hate yourself because you got knocked down. Learning means getting knocked down 1,000 times.
Yeah.
Just learn to do anything.
Exactly. So I do like this film. There are bits in it, but when we get to our reviews, we'll see what scores we give it. Anyway, we'll come to the end. We've been sort of overrunning a little bit. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us, and I do hope that you do. Well, no, I'm not going to say do or not, do or do not. Do go back and listen to our old episodes. Please try Stories Out of Time and Space. There are plenty of things there to try and explore. We've done all kinds of things. Lots and lots of films. Red Dwarf, Westworld, Doctor Who. We've covered all kinds of different bits and pieces. Please go back and try our episodes. If you like what we're doing, go leave a review on your podcast catcher. 5 stars preferably, but any feedback is appreciated. We really enjoy to hear from you. And finally, if you like what we're doing and you like what Julian and I talk about, go check out the Patreon. You will find a lot of things on there, especially our series Trekking Through the Twilight Zone. We're working through the Twilight Zone episode by episode, and that is also being released on this feed every other week, going back to the first season. But if you go onto Patreon, we're into season 3. Actually, now we're sort of doing well into season 3. So yeah, go check that out. We're doing a whole bunch of stuff now. So links down below for those things. But Julian, thank you very much for talking Star Wars. And
it's my honor, and I've learned about this movie through talking with you. And thank you for listening, everyone. And get more involved. We love doing this. And if
we do
love this half as much as we love doing this,
yes,
that would be awesome.
And in the next episode, we are returning to a small mining organization on a different planet. But we're going to be joined by Sean Connery in Outland. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm looking forward to talking about that film. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And we'll talk again soon.
There's something very important I forgot to tell you.
What?
Don't cross the streams.